it's Madeline Petch. Let's talk about climate change, shall we? It's everybody's favorite topic. So I thought it'd be important to give you guys some tools and tricks on easy ways to reduce your carbon footprint. Let's talk about going plant-based. I've been plant-based my entire life, and it is such a great and easy way to help the environment. Now, I'm not saying to go fully plant-based, and a lot of people are very against that. However, if you had one vegan meal a day, you would reduce greenhouse gas emissions largely. You could have all of your friends do one vegan meal a day. You would be helping the environment so much. I don't think people realize how bad animal agriculture is for greenhouse gas emissions, honestly. So just think about it. It's really healthy, it's easy, it tastes good, it doesn't have to be disgusting, and it'll help the environment and it'll make you feel better.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm excited to be back with you all today to close out day 2 of the American Climate Leadership Summit with youth leaders, a group of truly stellar young women who are driving change. Mostly, I'm excited because this must mean I'm still considered youth, and that is certainly a high point of my day. Here with me are Sofia Gilani, climate action advocate with Green Muslims, Piper Christian, a student at the University of Utah and board member of Citizens Climate Lobby, Daniela Fernandez, founder and CEO of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, and Katie Eder, executive director of Future Coalition. And you guessed it, we have another survey for you. So head over to the Action Center and we'll take a look at those results in just a bit. So our first question to the panel, what do adults, let's say the 35 and up crowd, need to do to support your work? Bill McKibben said earlier today that the unrelenting pressure from the youth movement is what's driving change right now, and youth have come up in every single panel today. So if there's one thing you could ask that demographic to do, what is it? And Sophia, let's start with you.
Hi, thanks. I would say I actually have top 3, and it would be to support grassroots campaigns, to make room for young, progressive, and bold ideas, and most importantly, to listen to grassroots campaigns and to all the ideas that the youth has.
Piper, go ahead.
Yeah, wonderful question. I've been asked this a lot at various conferences and presentations. And while it might be a bit cheesy, I think something that I frequently share is that it is more helpful to give young people a hand up than a high five. So what I've seen is there's a lot of people who might be cheering young people's efforts from the sidelines, but not following up those congratulations with really actionable items. So something I notice is that older adults have more social capital. You have, through your career and perhaps other connections, you might be able to get young people into spaces we can't otherwise access. So think about the careers, the communities, the people that you know, and see how you can bring young people into those spaces of power so that when we want to bring about change, we have access to do so.
Yeah, Daniela.
Hi, everyone. I would definitely add the importance of having adults champion young people. Similar to what was just said, there are a lot of opportunities for young people to join boards of corporations, board of organizations, to sit on city councils. So I agree that it's not enough to just bring up the fact that young people need to be included in these discussions, but it's about creating those actionable seats at the table to make sure that young people's voices are heard and that we are represented, because we should be decision makers at this stage. It's not just up to the folks in power to make decisions that affect our future, but we should definitely have a seat at the table.
And Katie.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with all of you. Definitely, I think it's about showing up, and I think it's about showing up in a supportive capacity. The team that I work with, we joke that how there's mansplaining and then there's adultsplaining, and I think sometimes adults enter into spaces and think they know best, which a lot of times they might, depending on the topic. But I think to be a strong adult ally, the best thing that one could do is show up and say, how can I help? Not I can help in this way or you should be doing this, and not telling, but really asking. And I think that often sort of serves the best allyship. And I think it also fosters the best intergenerational collaboration, because I think recognizing that young people and adult allies bring different things to the table, but they're equal in their power and their potential. And it's just a matter of sort of figuring out how those puzzle pieces can fit together.
Yeah, and I just bring, thinking about the theme of this summit, ambition, restoration, justice, it feels like the youth movement in general has just from the start integrated that into your work, where perhaps the movement writ large maybe hasn't yet or was dragging their feet. And so what was different about forming youth leadership that made it so apparent to incorporate themes, particularly of justice, right from the start? And really anybody can jump in on this one.
I'm happy to jump in. I do think that it's the values that our generation brings to the table that are very different than the values that have been seen in the past. For example, our generation values transparency more than anything. We want to know the information. We want to have access to it. We value inclusivity. We want to make sure that everyone is a part of these conversations. We don't see a hierarchy. We don't see people differently because of their color of their skin or where they're coming from. And that's something that hasn't been seen in the past. And I also believe that to the core, we don't have to be convinced that problems in our environment are real. We're at a point where we're desperately looking for solutions, where in the past few decades, people have been fighting to convince the science is real, whereas now we are saying, we know that it's happening. You don't have to convince us. Let's figure out solutions and let's figure out change.
Yeah, others want to hop in on ambition, restoration, justice?
I couldn't agree with what Danielle said more about not having to fight against the science and just knowing that it's real, fighting for the solutions now, and knowing that there's going to be a set of people that might not believe it, but you can still move forward, and we should, without stopping and always trying to explain a reason why we should be, and just doing it.
I also think, adding on to that, couldn't agree with both of you more. And I think the other thing that's really unique about young people is that we don't see problems as static in the way that I think generations in the past haven't. It's not so, there's one bucket over here and one bucket over here. I think we understand that everything is connected. And I think when we're talking about climate, which is, an issue that intersects with every single other issue that we might be fighting for, young people inherently know that they're all connected and inherently know that we have to look at it through a lens of justice. I think we're seeing with the rise of visibility around movement for Black lives that more of generations above us are starting to understand this link and see this. And I think that's something that we as the youth movement continue to strive to push forward and within our own spaces educate ourselves around. But I think for us, it's a human problem. It's of course about it's about nature, and I think it's about the planet, but I think more so than in generations past when it's been about just the melting ice caps and polar bears, that we understand that this is about people and this is about social justice, and one cannot exist without the other.
I think for me, and I mirror what the others have said as well, that focus on ambition that I think is kind of becoming a trademark of our generation, unfortunately has come just out of necessity and urgency. I know that from my perspective, I got engaged in climate activism within my state because I felt so powerless watching the actions at the federal level, and feeling that it was almost the only way I could sit with what I was witnessing as a young person. So I think, and the political has just so clearly come to our doorsteps, especially our generation, in so many different fronts, from school shootings and witnessing the police brutality at hand. And I think so because of that, we're informed and we're really taking action to engage.
Yeah, and so from everybody, thank you for all of that. I think it's been truly inspiring, and we'll get to the results of the polls in just a minute, but we've seen those types of results in what ecoAmerica's own research. You all got your starts in the movement. I'm really interested in, do you want to make a career out of this work? And maybe if not, how do you see yourselves in this work moving forward? Because we do need you to stay in it. And we also know that burnout is real. I know that burnout is real. And so what's your plan for maintaining consistent engagement? Because you got a lot of years left in your leadership. Piper, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be the first to admit that I have gone through a cycle of burnout so many times. And I think what keeps me centered in this work is a focus on community and collective responsibility. While it's awesome to see climate heroes coming out of this movement, I think that individualism can kind of be the Achilles heel of social movements. We need to have a sense of collective responsibility, not because, oh, don't make this movement about yourself, but more that it's such a burden to carry. It's such an enormous problem, climate change, that when we are able to see just a small group of friends, or maybe your local community or some mentors to lean upon, that's what's really helped me maintain kind of the longevity of this work. And yeah, I hope to make a career of this work, but I know that I can't do it without the support of my community.
Katie, jump in.
Yeah, that's so well said, Piper. I completely agree. And I think that, I have the exact same way. Is like, I've definitely had those cycles of sort of burnout, and, the highs are high and the lows are lows. But, I think that, I agree. Like, I think it's about community. It's about being together. I honestly, for my own future, have not really sure what I want to do. I'm right now watching Madam Secretary, so I'm like all about the State Department, but I don't know if that's a realistic thing. I think that this is the present moment is honestly, like, there's no better time for us to be doing what we're doing. I mean, this year, especially, with this election coming up, I mean, this is really the time, and this might be, the most pivotal fight we fight. I hope, at least, that we don't end up in this dire of a situation. But the truth is, we don't have the luxury, I guess, of looking into the future and saying, what do we want to be doing when we're 30 or 40 or 50, because we have no idea what the state of the world will look like. And so I feel a really strong obligation to be here and now and act in the present moment. And I think that as a generation, we've sort of been forced to step up in that role, but it's definitely, I think, the best time for it. At least I hope it doesn't get worse from here, but you never know.
Yeah, and Sophia?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with everybody else. Right now I work at a landfill doing a lot of compliance and regulation. And so I'm not very climate active in that specific job. So I do a lot of my stuff on the side, volunteer work with friends through the different support networks that I've built, which is the only way to keep going, is to have the support networks that when you're a little burnt out, you have somebody else that can take the reins and you can support them a little bit while you take a little break to refocus. But in the future, I have a huge passion for climate action as it relates to solid waste. And it's the little group that I feel like not a lot of people think about, because a landfill is just a hole in the ground to a lot of people, whereas I've worked at one for 4 years now. And to me, it's way more than a hole in the ground. It's the resource usage that we use, where that resources are coming from, who's getting the pollution from that. And there's a lot of ways to incorporate climate action into your own personal passions outside of like the political sphere or school. And I think it shows the variety and the necessity of climate action in pretty much every industry.
Daniela?
And what I would add is I often get asked, how did you become a social entrepreneur? And it's as if I had it planned all along, and I had no idea that I would do this for the rest of my life. And I actually graduated from Georgetown, and after graduation, I just decided that I had built an organization that
was depending on me, and a lot of young people all over the world were looking at me for guidance. And so going back to the idea of necessity, it was something that I felt I just had this inherent responsibility to build and continue building. And now the role that I see for myself is, given that I've already gone through a journey of building a global organization, I want to inspire and help other young people do the same thing in their respective areas, right? I want to make sure that I can encourage them, give them best practices, give them the lessons that I've learned, and to get them and help them get there faster than I did, because we desperately need every young person and every idea that's out there to get a spotlight and to get some funding and to get some support. Because it's not going to be one organization in one sector in the environment that saves the planet. It's going to be a lot of different projects coming together at large. So I think that for me, it's not even a career. To me, career isn't a word that I would ever use to describe this work. It's really a calling. It's a purpose that we've all entered. And I think that our generation also is willing to put behind this idea of profit. And because we know that in the long haul, no matter how much money we have in the bank, if we don't have clean waters, if we don't have a clean ocean, if we don't have air to breathe, money isn't going to matter. And I think that that's also what differentiates our generation from others.
Yeah, and I just wanted to turn to the polls now. We asked the audience how old they were when they took their first climate action. Actually, a full third of them were under 18. So that's great. Then 23% between 19 and 25, 26 and 40, another 20%, 41 to 60, 18%, and then over 60, 5%. And I haven't taken an action yet, 2%. So we hope that we're giving lots of good concrete ideas for folks to take action after the summit. So we do have folks tuning in who have yet to take their first action, but please do. And then we also asked how the youth strikes, how the youth-led climate strikes make people feel. We asked if it made people feel hopeful. 85% very hopeful, 10% somewhat hopeful, and 5% a little hopeful. So you're giving people hope. And then nobody said not at all. So that's good. And then the next one was, do the youth-led climate strikes makes you feel motivated? And very motivated, 79%. Somewhat motivated, 18%, and a little motivated, 3%. But it's not motivating people. So any thoughts about that? You're giving people hope. And I know we had, the faith session earlier talked a lot about self-care and the need for personal resiliency and, mental health and climate change. So any comments on giving people hope and how you're harnessing, action to motivate others? Danielle, do you want to pick up here? Or?
Absolutely. So in the work that we do at SOA, we actually invest funding into startups that are helping protect our ocean. And to me, what wakes me up every morning with a smile on my face and just feeling hopeful and excited is the fact that these technologies are here. They're real. They're not something in a distant future. When I hear about projects, in coral restoration and in, turtle rehabilitation, these things are happening right now. And so I know that all it takes is for us to jumpstart these ideas, but also for other people, the folks that are mentioned that haven't taken an action yet or that took an action later in life. We need mentors, we need investors, we need people to really step up and help these ideas go from 0 to 1 and scale as fast as possible. So I would say that that's where my hope comes from, and also from seeing that there's more dialogue around the importance of solutions as opposed to continuously talking about the gravity of the problems.
Sophia?
Yeah, the most hopeful I've ever been in any climate action is last September at the march in DC. I took my 15-year-old sister to her first climate action. And it was exciting to be able to share my passion with my sister. And she got on somebody's shoulders and held her sign up high. And that was the happiest moment that she had during that entire march as well. And so seeing my passion spread is so hopeful to me. And at my job, before COVID, used to do a lot of education and outreach. And now do landfill tours to high school age kids who are just so freaking smart and the questions they would ask and the follow-up and connecting the dots and being able to relate that back to the climate, I think really shows how youth, no matter what age or how involved they've been with the action, that they have the passion, that they have the ideas, and that they're ready for those companies that can give them that startup idea or money, or help guide them into doing their next step.
And Piper and Katie, you want to jump in and also maybe tie in some of what it means to have hope on climate amidst COVID? That's come in as a question. So maybe we can relate the two, and how are we giving folks hope and continuing momentum in the work that needs to be done on climate amidst this other really pressing emergency, that this health emergency we're facing as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, one of the best lines, I think, is that the only thing stronger than fear is hope. And I think that for young people, what the trend that we see is that, you know, this idea of environmental melancholy, essentially that the climate change and the potential disaster as effects of climate change are so overwhelming and so scary that people feel like they can't do anything. And that fear is just, it's crippling. And it is for so many young people. And I think what we've seen over the last, you know, year and a half since the youth climate movement has really taken off is that fear has been translated to hope, and that, you know, by turning that anger and that frustration and that fear into action, that's where the hope comes in. And I think the piece that we need to see is that hope then translate into action. And we know that, you know, young people are taking action with every way that we possibly can, but we have to see it at all levels of society and in, you know, every sector of society. I think in times of COVID, that's both more challenging, and I think also provides an opportunity for an unprecedented comparison to what we'll experience during climate change. Because eventually, hopefully one day when we get a handle on this pandemic, you know, we will need to rebuild. And I think, you know, we need to look as we rebuild and say, you know, we were not prepared to handle this pandemic. Our government has 100% completely failed us. And if we see, which we will, the effects of climate change over the next 10 plus years to this degree, which we will, the government won't be able to handle it as it's set up today. And so our job as the climate movement, as we head forward into rebuilding, is to sound that alarm and say, this was our wake-up call. You know, this was our warning. This was our chance to understand what it will feel like for there to be an existential crisis that we are no way prepared to handle. And I hope that that means that we will use it as the wake-up call that it is, and rebuild in a way that, you know, follows the framework of the Green New Deal, that is done in a way that is a green recovery. So not only are we creating the millions of jobs that we need, but we're doing it in a way that's going to transition our society to one that will be contributing towards our healing of our planet, and you know, everything else that climate change is affecting, and every other issue that intersects with it.
That was so well said. I don't know if I have a great deal to add with response to COVID, just because Katie said it so well. But hope has always been a challenging one, I think. I've lived in Utah my entire life. It's a state that has been pretty staunchly anti-climate action for most of that time. And sometimes as an organizer in a conservative state, you can feel like you're working twice as hard for half the results. And so it can be really tough. But I think what's kept me hopeful is recognizing that there is such a ecosystem of ways to engage in this movement. There are people writing op-eds, there's those who are taking to the streets and marching, you know, folks engaging in our state legislature, people changing, you know, the way that we do business, all of those different things, and people bringing these social issues to the forefront of this. And so again, when I see maybe my small part in my state and what I'm doing against the context of what all these other young organizers are doing, that makes me really hopeful. And then quickly to touch to COVID, I think what has been amazing about this is the wake up call. I think environmentalism for so long has been so focused on individual responsibility, turn off the lights, use less water. And COVID has kind of done a better job at exposing the greater systems of oppression and maybe misinformation and those kind of things, and making us say, no, this is not just individual responsibility and small actions. These are whole systems that need to be re-examined and changed. And that's why things like the Strike for Climate are really calling attention to this is a systemic responsibility, and we'll act as individuals, but you also need to step up and change policies to make it easier for us to protect our climate.
And for folks who haven't seen it, please check out Piper's video for our American Climate Leadership Awards. She was a finalist and has a fantastic video about engaging youth leadership to change policy on the local level. So thank you for all the work that you're doing there and talking about it here. We've gotten a couple questions about the election and how we're encouraging support of climate initiatives in the upcoming election. And Katie, I know that Future Coalition has done some work on getting people to the polls and protecting people's vote. And so I just wanted to know, could you talk about that? And then we'll get into what everyone else is also doing to help people vote climate coming up really soon. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the election at 85 days, I want to say we're at now. I mean, this is quite literally, I think going to be the most important election of our lifetime. I think, hopefully, at least. I think that, literally the fate of our planet is at stake. And that's not an exaggeration. Who we have, the current administration that is in office, is beyond unequipped to handle the climate emergency. We're seeing that around COVID. We are just not prepared, and we need somebody in office, not necessarily who themselves are huge climate champions, but who we can hold accountable. We're seeing it right now with the plan that the Biden campaign has come out with. The plan that his campaign is currently running on is from our movement. That's our language. Those are our demands. Is it as, radical as we want it to be? Maybe not, but it's getting there. It's a step in the right direction. And so as we look toward the election, I think it is the responsibility of our generation to show up. The election, every election, it's not the magic silver bullet. It's not, we don't have that in a democratic society, but is a necessary step on that path to revolution that we are looking for. Young people, Gen Z and millennials, if we voted in full force, we'd be the largest voting bloc. We'd make up almost 40% of the electorate. We would decide essentially every single election at every single level across the country. Right now, voter registration numbers are down. There are lots of barriers in place that are keeping young people from voting. But the truth is, if they wanted us to vote, they wouldn't do so much to keep us from getting there. The fact that that there are so many roadblocks in place to keep us from voting is the reason that we have to do it. I think that for young people, especially for youth climate organizers, I think it's really hard when the candidate or all of the candidates, may not be championing our beliefs in the way that we want them to be. And I think that can often be a bit discouraging. But I think that, we have a lot of power. And if we exercise that power, we're going to start to see people in office that look like us, that sound like us, that reflect our beliefs. And so I think that, this is the first of many elections that we have to show up in full force. And we, it has to be part of our rebellion. And I think that is, I think we're going to see it. I think we're going to do it. I think that, there's a lot of barriers, especially because students aren't going to be on college campuses. There are a lot of barriers keeping us from voting, but we have to do it. We're young, we're digitally savvy, we understand how to use technological tools. We're in a place to be leaders in this election in organizing compared to other generations. So yeah, I think that, this is the election of our lifetime, and I'm excited to see young people storm the polls in November.
And Daniela, when you answer this question, can you also, I sometimes I hear older adults say, oh, well, younger people, they're not willing to compromise. They ask for too much. They're too idealistic, and they don't get it. They don't understand the sausage making that is our policy system. And so, what they're asking for is unrealistic. So what's your response to that? Have you heard that before? And
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, and what's your response? Yeah.
I'm sure we've all heard that before. And I also think that being young and being in this space, you're often told that you don't know how things work. You're not taken seriously. You're patted on the head sometimes and told it's going to be okay. And then just, people walk away. So I share all that because it's so important that we are able to compromise. We're able to have a dialogue with adults, because one thing is for us to villainize them and for it is to be an us against them mentality, which never gets us anywhere. And a whole other conversation is to be able to, like I mentioned before, get the seat at the table, have a conversation, have them understand our perspective, have them understand where we're coming from. And also for young people to come up with alternatives, right? To come up with innovation. Because oftentimes what happens is older people say, well, it can't be done because that, whatever it is, doesn't exist. Well, so let's go ahead and prove them wrong and let's build it, right? And that's the mentality of being creators, of being entrepreneurs, of being doers that our generation has, which in the past, older people feel like, well, it's not part of the system. It's not how bureaucracy works. That's not how things are done. So I think it's a level of changing their mindset too and helping them act with urgency, because time is not on our side. And that's something that as young people, we live and we breathe and we wake up every morning knowing that we're running out of time. And it's something that I hope is translated in these elections. And just to answer the question broadly, of course, these elections are important here in the US. And I'm also very lucky to have perspective on how other countries are working, because we work with young people in 165 countries, right? The US obviously is a very important part of the equation, but we created a youth policy advisory committee so we can have a person from the Marshall Islands, a person from Kenya, a person from the US, have these conversations about what policies need to come up in which different regions and how we can really have this cohesive dialogue. Because if one country doesn't do their job well, another one does, we're not going to be in equilibrium here. And as we've noted already, our ocean, our planet unites us all. So it really has to be a global political movement that needs to happen.
Piper?
Both Katie and Daniela said it so well. I think it's definitely a real watershed moment this year, working during the time of an election. And I think, it's exciting for me because, as I said earlier, it was the sense of I can engage at the local level because I just feel like the federal level will not listen. And now we're finally arriving at a time where we might be able to change that. And so that is just such an exciting moment for me. I also think it's important to point out that one of those barriers, especially for young people, that I have personally experienced is that it's important to re-register to vote if you are a college student and you have moved back home from your college, if it's outside of a district, outside of your state. I moved home from Salt Lake City back to Logan, Utah, and I couldn't participate in my local election for governor because, for state representatives because I didn't re-register in time, and it was so frustrating. So it's just so important to keep up-to-date information out so that we can make sure that as many young people as possible can engage.
Yeah, Sophia.
Yeah, agree with all the sentiments that were said. And I'm in Virginia, and so in the DC metro area, there's so many organizations that are really, really pushing to get the vote out. There's the Muslim Justice Collective that are trying to get Muslim communities to vote. And even working with Green Muslims, we've noticed that the Muslim community in this area is a little slower to embrace climate action. And so working with those communities that might not know what's at stake, or with communities that are disenfranchised and don't have the time to go and vote, find out ways you can support them, all the GoFundMes, all of the organizations that are out there that are giving those support for people to go out and vote is really important right now.
Yeah, and we're just about at time. That flew by. I could talk to you all day. But we have to end on the youth movement is known for getting out into the streets and marching and, organizing large groups of people in public spaces, which we can't do right now in the same way that we could. So how is as we look to this very important moment in a couple months, as we look to shape what the next 4 years look like, how are you organizing right now? And just really lightning answers. How are you organizing right now? Katie, let's start with you.
Yeah, definitely. Quick, I'll just say that I believe that in the last few months, since we've seen this new level of sustained organizing around Movement for Black Lives, I think this has dramatically changed how we're going to see organizing in this country for the next many decades. I think that we haven't seen sustained protests like this since the civil rights movement in the 60s. And I mean, that changed the game. And I think this is changing the game. Because of COVID, because of the organizing we're seeing on the streets right now, we're not going to see climate strikes like we used to. That's just not how we're going to organize. I think we've reached a whole new level. There's a whole new bar. I'm really excited to see what happens when we do elect an administration that we can hold accountable through mass mobilization, because I think, honestly, the world has not seen what our generation was capable of. We've proved a lot over the last 2.5 years, but I think we have a lot more coming. So I'm really excited to see what happens.
Yeah, Piper.
Okay, three quick things with regards to COVID in particular that have been helpful for me. First, what we're doing right now, Zoom calls. I'm on the divestment committee for my university, and we're doing regular outreach events to get input over Zoom and hosting environmental justice club meetings over Zoom. So that's still a wonderful platform. The second is writing op-eds. Op-eds have a huge audience. You can sometimes be accessing up to thousands of people. With that, and your elected officials frequently read them. So if you have a strong opinion on some injustice or climate issues you see in your community, write to your paper about it. And then the third thing for me has been self-education. I think we had some medical, some people from the medical community present. They regularly attend workshops and trainings to keep their license up to date. As an activist, I think it's our responsibility to also maintain, up-to-date information. So I've been doing a lot to learn about how to better incorporate anti-racism into my organizing activities, and to learn about the intersections between the different movements that we've been seeing right now.
Sophia.
Yeah, going forward, I've seen so much on social media and so many different organizations, climate, racial justice, political justice, environmental racism, everything. All these organizations are supporting each other, and doing it online is making it so easy. You can see everybody sharing on their Instagram story, especially. You can have a little picture that gives you quick little bit of information, and then you read the caption, it has all that information. And I'm seeing it personally within friends in my network, where we can share different ideas within whatever we know best, whatever organization we work with best, to be able to really get that interdisciplinary education going, so that we can be more educated about everything that's going on. Because like we said at the very beginning, this climate movement has changed dramatically than when it was in the 70s. It's not just protect the wilderness, now it's environmental justice and caring about people.
And Daniela.
Sure. So I do think that this pivot and going online could have posed a lot of obstacles, but I think for us, we've used it as an opportunity to expand and scale our efforts. In the past, we've brought people together to San Francisco to give them access to funding, training, mentorship. But now doing it online, we're able to reach a lot more people. We've scaled the amount of people we're going to support this year. We've also supported more nonprofits, entrepreneurs, not only in the for-profit side, but on the nonprofit side. So we are seeing a lot more reach that we can have through these online series that we do, these online summits that we do. So I don't think that the fact that we are at home should deter any of us. And I think we also have the technology at our fingertips. And what I believe wholeheartedly is the fact that how can we have apps like TikTok and like Instagram and like Twitter, but we don't have an app that facilitates how to vote in the US? As I'm confused as to how to vote in the US. Like, it's such a confusing process. And I think that it's hard to say why and why people haven't had enough time or innovation or bandwidth to figure it out. But I do think that in the next couple of months, whoever gets that right will make a tremendous change in the entire the future of our planet, like someone said earlier, because all we need to do is build that access, that education, and our generation will definitely show up. We just need to make it easy for them.
Well, I thank you so much for your time today, for the ongoing leadership you're showing, and for what I really, really hope are decades to come of your leadership and your actions. And your words today, I think, are really important, not just to close out the day, but to bring people inspiration in this critical time, as we've talked about. So with that, thank you again. And over to Bob and Megan to close us out for day 2 of ACLS.